Amara Johnson was the quiet black girl everyone underestimated. At Dunbar High, whispers followed her. Too serious, too proud, too different. Kyle Whitcomb and his crew ruled the halls with arrogance, mocking anyone who didn't fit their narrow mold. To them, Amara was an easy target, the kind who wouldn't fight back, and when an egg smashed against her head in front of everyone, they thought they'd won. What they didn't know was that beneath her calm exterior lay years of training, focus, and power. Amara Johnson wasn't just quiet. She was a karate black belt, and that day, silence learned how to fight back. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Through the bustling hallways of Dunbar High, Amara Johnson moved like a shadow, her backpack snug against her shoulders and her steps measured and deliberate. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long rectangles of light across the freshly waxed floors. She kept her eyes forward, her face a mask of calm despite the whispers that followed her like persistent echoes. "Look at Miss Perfect," a voice hissed from a cluster of girls near the lockers. Always acting so proper. Amara adjusted the strap of her backpack, maintaining her steady pace. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Walk like you own the ground beneath your feet." So she did, even as the whispers grew louder. In AP Chemistry, Mrs. Reynolds called on her to answer a complex equation. Amara's response was quick and precise, earning a few eye rolls from her classmates. "My, aren't you strong-willed today?" Mrs. Reynolds remarked, her tone carrying that familiar edge that Amara had learned to recognize. It wasn't quite criticism, but it wasn't praise either. Just another way of saying she was too much. During third period, Kyle Whitcomb and his friends took their usual seats behind her in English class. She could feel their presence, heavy with intention, before the first spitball hit her chair. "Oops," Kyle whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "My bad. Guess I'm just clumsy around certain people." His friends snickered, and Amara kept her eyes on her copy of "Their Eyes Were Watching God," her finger tracing the words as if they could shield her from what was happening. The teacher, Mr. Bennett, glanced up briefly before returning to his laptop, his silence speaking volumes. Lunchtime brought no relief. Amara sat at her usual table, unpacking the lunch her grandmother had prepared. Cornbread and honey, just the way she liked it. Kyle and his group passed by, deliberately bumping her table. "Watch it!" Chase Whitcomb called out with fake concern. "Table's unstable. Kind of like some people we know." Coach Whitcomb stood nearby, monitoring the cafeteria. His laugh carried across the room as he watched his son's antics. "Boys will be boys," he said to another teacher, loud enough for Amara to hear. She took another bite of her cornbread, chewing slowly, deliberately. Each swallow was an exercise in control. Each breath a reminder of Sensei Ab's teachings about patience and discipline. The afternoon classes dragged on, a parade of small humiliations. In geography, someone had drawn a crude caricature on her desk. In math, her raised hand was consistently ignored, despite having the correct answers. When the final bell rang, Amara walked home, taking the long way through the park. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath her feet. It was easier to breathe out here, away from the suffocating halls of Dunbar High. At home, Mama Ruth was in the kitchen, the smell of sweet potato pie filling the house. One look at Amara's face, and her grandmother's eyes narrowed with concern. "Baby girl," Mama Ruth said softly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Something's troubling you." Amara shook her head, managing a small smile. "Just tired, Mama. Long day." Mama Ruth watched her for a moment longer, her wise eyes seeing more than Amara wanted to share. "Sometimes," she said carefully, The strongest trees bend the most in the storm. I'm fine, Amara insisted, heading upstairs to her room. Really? Later that night, after dinner and homework, Amara sat at her desk. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of her mother's late-night news show downstairs. She pulled out her journal, a simple black notebook with worn edges, and began to write. Dear Journal, today was another test. They don't know it, but every mockery, every whisper, every silent teacher is just another chance to practice what Sensei taught me. Strength isn't in fighting back, it's in choosing when not to fight. But sometimes I wonder if they mistake my silence for weakness. If they think my calm means they've won. She paused, pen hovering over the paper, before continuing. Mama Ruth says a diamond doesn't shine without pressure. Maybe that's what this is. Pressure creating something stronger than they could imagine. I won't let them see me break. I won't give them that satisfaction. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, and their whispers can't drown out the roar of my heritage. Amara closed the journal and walked to her window. The street below was quiet, streetlights casting pools of yellow light on the sidewalk. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, straight-backed, composed, unwavering. One day they'll see me, she whispered to her reflection, the words barely disturbing the night air. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual lunchtime chaos. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the beige walls and scratched lunch tables. Amara sat at her corner spot, the same table she'd claimed since freshman year, methodically unpacking her lunch. Steam rose from her thermos of homemade soup, a comfort against the autumn chill. At the popular table, Kyle Whitcomb huddled with his crew, Chase, Hunter, and Dylan. Their laughter carried across the room, too loud, too deliberate. Kyle held something behind his back, passing it from hand to hand as he whispered to his friends. "This'll be epic," Chase said, already holding up his phone. "TikTok's gonna blow up." Hunter snickered, nudging Dylan. "Man, she won't know what hit her." "Literally," Dylan added, earning more laughs. Kyle straightened his Letterman jacket, raw egg concealed in his palm. His friends formed a loose circle around him, phones at the ready as they approached Amara's table. Other students noticed, conversations dying down as heads turned to watch. Amara spooned another mouthful of soup, either unaware or unbothered by their approach. The silver spoon clinked quietly against the thermos as she set it down. Kyle positioned himself directly behind her. Chase started recording, giving a thumbs up. The cafeteria grew quieter, anticipation building like static before a storm. Crack. The sound of the egg breaking against Amara's head echoed in the sudden silence. Yellow yolk dripped down her neat braids, spreading across her shoulders and staining her white sweater. Pieces of shell clung to her hair. Laughter exploded through the cafeteria. Phones appeared everywhere, dozens of screens capturing her humiliation. Someone near the back shouted, "Get that online!" "Looks like breakfast is served," Hunter called out, earning more cruel laughter. Amara didn't jump, didn't scream, didn't even flinch. She sat perfectly still, hands flat on the table, breathing once, deeply. The change was subtle, invisible to those who weren't watching closely. Her shoulders squared slightly. Her chin lifted a fraction, but her eyes turned to steel. "What's wrong?" Kyle taunted, circling to face her. "Cat got your tongue?" "Maybe she's gonna cry," Chase suggested, zooming in with his phone. "What are you gonna do about it?" Hunter stepped closer, shoving her shoulder. "Huh? Nothing. That's what..." The movement was so fast it seemed impossible. One moment, Amara was seated. The next, she was standing, her jacket sliding off to reveal a black karate GI top beneath her sweater. Hunter's second shove met empty air as she pivoted. Her legs swept out in a perfect arc, catching Hunter's ankles. He went down hard, shock replacing his sneer as his back hit the linoleum floor. Before he could process what happened, Amara's palm struck his chest. Not hard enough to hurt, but with enough force to keep him down. Chase lunged forward, phone forgotten. Amara moved like water, redirecting his momentum. He sailed over a nearby table, landing with a crash among scattered lunch trays. Dylan grabbed for her arm, but she was already moving. She caught his wrist, twisted, not enough to break, just enough to control, and guided him down to his knees. A quick release, and he sprawled backward, scrambling away. The cafeteria fell silent. Phones lowered one by one, their owners too stunned to keep recording. Kyle stood frozen, egg yolk still dripping from his hand. As Amara turned to face him, she stood straight, calm as ever, surveying the chaos around her. Hunter remained on the floor, nose bleeding slightly from where he'd hit the ground. Chase was still tangled in the overturned table, food staining his precious Letterman jacket. Dylan had backed away, holding his wrist and staring at her with wide eyes. "You wanted a show," Amara said, her voice carrying in the silence. "Now you're in it." Egg still dripped from her braids, but somehow she looked more dignified than ever. The cafeteria doors swung shut behind her, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Kyle staggered backward, blood streaming from his nose and spattering his white school shirt. His hand came away red when he touched his face, eyes widening in disbelief. The cafeteria exploded with noise, gasps, screams, and excited shouts bouncing off the walls. "You think you're tough?" Kyle spat, blood dripping onto the linoleum floor. His face twisted with rage, transforming from shock to fury. "You're dead!" Hunter and Dylan rushed forward, their sneakers squeaking against the floor. Amara stepped back smoothly, raising her hands in a defensive stance. Her movements were controlled, precise. Nothing like Kyle's wild anger. "Back off," she warned, voice steady despite the chaos. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Kyle lunged forward, swinging wildly. Amara blocked the punch, redirecting his momentum as she sidestepped. She shoved him away, but now they were circling her, 4 against 1, closing in like wolves. A lunch tray crashed beside her head, missing by inches. Someone, Chase, shoved her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. The circle tightened. When Dylan came at her from the left, she had no choice. Block, counter, quick and clean. He fell back, clutching his jaw. But before she could reset her stance, Hunter tackled her from behind. The floor slammed into her back, driving the air from her lungs. Pain exploded in her side as Dylan's foot connected. Chase grabbed her arm, twisting it at an ugly angle. Amara's face contorted, teeth gritted against the burning in her shoulder, but she didn't cry out. The crowd pressed closer. Phone cameras flashed everywhere, some students cheering, others watching in frozen horror. No one stepped in to help. Amara's training took over. She swept her leg in a wide arc, creating space. The pressure on her arm released. 2 quick strikes, one to Hunter's solar plexus, another catching Dylan's chin, sent them stumbling back. The boys hesitated, their confidence wavering. But Kyle wasn't done. He charged forward, head lowered like a bull. His forehead rammed into her shoulder. Amara went down again, vision swimming from the impact. "Stop! Enough!" Ms. Park's voice cut through the roar of the crowd like a knife. Heavy footsteps thundered across the cafeteria as Coach Whitcomb burst through the ring of students. His face was red with anger, but his fury wasn't directed at the boys. He pointed a thick finger at Amara. "What is wrong with you, girl?" he bellowed. "Have you lost your mind?" Ms. Park pushed through the crowd, reaching down to help Amara up. The teacher positioned herself between Amara and the boys, her small frame somehow making Coach Whitcomb step back. Blood trickled from Amara's split lip. Her left eye was already swelling. and her uniform was stained with food and dirt. But she stood straight, shoulders back, eyes locked on Kyle's face. He met her gaze and flinched, because what he saw there wasn't defeat or fear or even anger. It was something stronger, pure, unshakable will, the look of someone who couldn't be broken. That night, videos of the fight flooded every social media platform. Different angles showed different moments. The initial egg attack, Amara's first defense, the brutal group assault. Karate Girl started trending within hours. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. "This girl is my hero. So violent, she should be expelled. Finally, someone stands up to these bullies. She attacked those poor boys." At home, Amara sat quietly at the dinner table, holding an ice pack to her face. Her phone buzzed constantly until she turned it off. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. Mama Ruth set down a plate of food Amara couldn't bring herself to touch. "They'll cheer you today," her grandmother said softly, "but punish you tomorrow. That's how it always goes." Later that evening, Sensei Abe visited. He examined her injuries with careful hands, his eyes heavy with understanding but glowing with pride. "You showed control today," he said. "Not rage. That's important. But remember, the system fears your power more than their violence." In the empty dojo that night, Amara stood before the wall of mirrors. Dried blood still stained the collar of her shirt. Her reflection showed every bruise, every mark they'd left on her. But her eyes were clear and steady as she whispered, "I didn't fight. I survived." The morning sun cast long shadows through Principal Carr's office windows, making the room feel colder than it was. Amara sat straight-backed in an uncomfortable chair, her school uniform neat despite yesterday's chaos. Across the massive oak desk, Principal Carr studied her with folded hands and pursed lips. The silence stretched until Principal Carr cleared her throat. "Miss Johnson, do you understand the seriousness of what happened yesterday?" Before Amara could answer, the office door opened. Kyle shuffled in, followed by Hunter, Dylan, and Chase. Their faces were carefully arranged into expressions of fear and hurt. Kyle's nose was swollen. A white bandage stretched across it. "Sit down, boys," Principal Carr said softly, her tone gentler than the one she'd used with Amara. "You're safe here." Kyle sank into a chair, shoulders hunched. His eyes darted toward Amara before quickly looking away. I can't believe she did this to us," he said, voice trembling. "We were just joking around." "Joking?" Amara's voice was quiet but firm. "You smashed an egg on my head." "It was just a prank," Hunter cut in, his voice cracking. "We didn't mean anything by it." "But then she went crazy, like some kind of ninja psycho." Coach Whitcomb stepped into the office, his massive frame filling the doorway. "These are good boys, Margaret," he said to Principal Carr. "They're just kids being kids. But what she did?" He pointed at Amara. That was calculated violence. Ms. Park slipped in behind him, her face tight with concern. "If we're discussing violence, shouldn't we address the egg incident first? And the fact that 4 boys attacked 1 girl?" "Ms. Park," Principal Carr's voice carried a warning edge. "This isn't your meeting." "But I witnessed." "That will be all, Ms. Park." Principal Carr's tone left no room for argument. Ms. Park's hands clenched at her sides, but she fell silent. Her eyes met Amara's, full of helpless anger. Principal Carr turned back to Amara. "The video evidence is quite clear. You used excessive force against your classmates. This kind of violent behavior cannot be tolerated at our school." "Violent?" Amara's voice remained steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "I defended myself. They attacked me. All 4 of them." "After you assaulted Kyle," Coach Whitcomb interrupted. "Look at his face." Dylan wiped at his eyes. putting on a show. We're all scared to be in the same room with her now. What if she snaps again? Amara watched in disbelief as Principal Carr nodded sympathetically at the boys. The woman who was supposed to protect all students reached for a document on her desk. Miss Johnson, due to your violent outburst and the disruption you've caused, you're suspended for 2 weeks. She slid the paper across the desk. The boys will receive counseling to help them process this trauma. Trauma? The word felt like acid in Amara's mouth. They filmed themselves humiliating me. They ganged up on me. And I'm the one being punished? You're lucky we're not pressing charges, Coach Whitcomb growled. Kyle sniffled loudly, playing his part perfectly. We just want to feel safe at school again. Principal Carr's expression hardened. Miss Johnson, I suggest you sign this suspension notice and use this time to reflect on your choices. Violence is never the answer. Amara stared at the paper, her vision blurring with unshed tears of frustration. She'd expected fairness. She'd believed that standing up for herself would matter. Instead, she was being painted as the aggressor while her attackers played victim. This isn't right, she said softly. Sign the paper, Miss Johnson. Principal Carr's voice was ice-cold now. With a steady hand that betrayed none of her inner turmoil, Amara signed. She stood up, dignity intact, despite the injustice crushing her chest. We'll need your father to sign this too, Principal Carr said to Kyle, her voice warming again. But don't worry, we'll make sure nothing like this happens again. That evening, Amara sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, the suspension notice lying between them like a wound. The smell of Mama Ruth's sweet potato pie filled the air, but Amara couldn't eat. They made me the villain, she said, her voice finally cracking. All I did was defend myself, and they turned it around. Made me the violent one. The dangerous one. Mama Ruth's weathered hands covered Amara's trembling ones. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, held decades of understanding. Then make them face the truth, she said simply, strength in every word. The kitchen was quiet, except for the scratch of Amara's pen against paper. Outside, crickets chirped in the growing darkness as she sat at the worn wooden table, carefully writing each incident in neat rows. The list grew longer with every memory. Called aggressive for raising my hand in class too much. Teacher said my braids were distracting, but ignored Kelsey's bright pink hair. Got detention for talking back when I corrected a mistake on the board. Her mother passed through, touching Amara's shoulder gently before heading to her night shift at the hospital. The house felt empty, but Amara kept writing, each line making her jaw clench tighter. Principal Carr told me to watch my attitude for using the same tone as other students. Coach Whitcomb picking only white students for team captain. Being called angry for staying quiet when they mock me. The doorbell rang, startling her. Ms. Park stood on the porch, still in her teaching clothes, but looking more determined than tired. She held up her laptop. I brought something you need to see, she said, stepping inside. And someone else wanted to help. Sienna Clark emerged from behind her, clutching her ever-present camera. The quiet white girl who always sat in the back of class looked nervous but resolute. I have the original video, Sienna said softly, pulling out her phone. The whole thing. Before they edited it, they gathered around the kitchen table, Amara's list pushed aside as Sienna pulled up the footage. The video was longer than the viral clips, starting several minutes before the egg incident. The image was clear, steady. Sienna's photography skills evident in the framing. Watch the background, Ms. Park pointed. There, behind the gathering bullies, stood Coach Whitcomb. He wasn't just present, he was laughing, nodding as Chase and the others prepared their prank. The coach's face showed no surprise when the egg cracked over Amara's head. Only anticipation. Entertainment. He knew. Amara whispered. He watched them plan it. The video continued, showing the full fight sequence. But now they could see what the edited version cut out, how the boys had surrounded her, how she'd tried to walk away 3 times before defending herself. And there was Coach Whitcomb again, not intervening until she fought back. "There's more," Sienna said, her voice stronger now. She pulled up screenshots of group chats. "They've been planning stuff like this all year. Not just against you, against other black students too. And look who's in the chat group." Coach Whitcomb's name appeared in several messages, along with Principal Carr's. They weren't just ignoring the racism. They were encouraging it. "This isn't just about bullying," Ms. Park said, her hands flat on the table. "This is systematic. They're creating an environment where certain students are targeted, then punished for defending themselves." Amara stared at her list, then at the evidence on Sienna's phone. Everything connected. Every attitude comment, every aggressive label, every punishment that white students never seemed to receive. "The system won't give me justice," she said slowly, her voice hardening with resolve. "So I'll make it happen." The front door opened again. Sensei Abe stepped in, still in his white GI from evening classes. He'd been teaching for 30 years, long enough to recognize the look in his students' eyes. "Planning your counterattack?" he asked, settling into a chair. "They think they can break me," Amara said, "but they don't understand what real strength is." Sensei Abe nodded, his weathered face serious. "Then plan your next move like a kata, deliberate, disciplined, each step flowing into the next." Ms. Park leaned forward. "We need to be strategic. They'll try to discredit you, paint you as the aggressor again. But we have proof now," Sienna added, holding up her phone. "Real proof." They worked late into the night, 4 unlikely allies around a kitchen table. Mrs. Park's legal knowledge, Sienna's technical skills, Sensei Abe's strategic wisdom, and Amara's quiet determination, each piece essential to their plan. When the others finally left, Amara stood at her bedroom window. The street below was dark and quiet, but she felt more awake than ever. Her reflection in the glass showed no anger, no fear, only focus. "I'll fight smarter," she whispered to the night, knowing tomorrow would bring the first steps of their plan into motion. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Amara sat at the table, her laptop open beside stacks of printed screenshots. Her grandmother, Mama Ruth, worked steadily at the counter, the soft plink of peas falling into a metal bowl, creating a gentle rhythm. "These messages go back months," Amara said, scrolling through another group chat. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled slightly on the trackpad. Mama Ruth hummed softly, her weathered hands never pausing their work. "Sometimes people tell on themselves without meaning to. You just have to listen right." Amara's phone buzzed. Another message from Sienna. More screenshots appeared, each one worse than the last. The group chat was filled with cruel jokes, racist memes, and planning sessions for pranks that were anything but funny. Kyle and his friends hadn't even tried to hide their hatred, confident no one would ever see these messages. "Look at this one," Amara said, turning the screen. A message from Chase showed him bragging about the egg incident days before it happened. Below it, Coach Whitcomb had responded with laughing emojis. Mama Ruth leaned over, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Her lips tightened as she read, but she kept shelling peas, each one cracking open with a bit more force. Another message popped up from Sienna. "Found worse ones. Coach involved." Amara opened the new files. There it was, in plain text. Coach Whitcomb writing to the group. "We'll humble her again. These ones need to learn their place." The kitchen seemed to grow colder despite the morning sun. Mama Ruth's hands finally stilled, a half-shelled pea forgotten between her fingers. "Print that one," she said quietly. "Print them all." Mrs. Park arrived an hour later, carrying a thick manila folder labeled Discrimination Complaint Draft. She spread papers across the table while Mama Ruth made coffee, explaining terms like hostile environment and systemic bias. "We need to document everything," Ms. Park said, organizing screenshots into categories. Every incident, every message, every time they've targeted students of color. This isn't just about the fight anymore. Amara's phone kept buzzing with updates from Sienna, who was quietly gathering more evidence at school. New messages showed Kyle spreading his version of events. "She just went crazy and attacked us. We were just joking around and she snapped." Everyone saw her hit first. The lies spread through the school's social circles like poison, but Amara remained focused on the evidence. Each new screenshot, each documented incident, was another piece of armor she was building. By afternoon, her eyes were burning from staring at screens. Ms. Park had left to file preliminary paperwork, taking copies of their strongest evidence. Mama Ruth insisted Amara take a break, practically pushing her out the door. "Go to your dojo," she said firmly. "Clear your head. The fight's not going anywhere." The familiar scent of wood and canvas greeted Amara as she entered the empty training hall. She changed into her gi mechanically, muscle memory taking over as she tied her black belt. The mirror wall reflected her image. Straight-backed, composed, ready. She began with basic punches, each strike precise and controlled. The rhythm helped empty her mind of screenshots and messages, replacing digital hatred with physical focus. Her fists cut through the air with increasing speed, each punch carrying the weight of a different incident. Strike, for every time they called her aggressive. Strike, for Coach Whitcomb's laughing emojis. Strike, for Kyle's lies spreading through school halls. Strike, for a system that kept protecting the wrong people. Her moves were sharp but controlled, each breath measured, each strike exact. This wasn't wild anger or blind rage. This was precision, discipline, power held in perfect check. Just as Sensei had taught her. The empty dojo absorbed the sounds of her training, the whisper of her gi, the sharp exhale with each punch, the quiet determination of a fighter who knew her battle was just beginning. She moved through the air like water, each strike flowing into the next, her reflection showing no sign of the turmoil beneath her calm surface. When she finally stopped, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training floor. Her body hummed with controlled energy, ready for whatever came next. The rage was still there, but it had transformed into something more useful. Focused resolve. She stood perfectly still in the center of the dojo, fists clenched at her sides, watching her reflection. The girl in the mirror looked back with steel in her eyes and fire in her heart, every muscle coiled with disciplined power, ready to strike, but patient enough to wait for the right moment. This was what they feared, she realized. Not just her physical strength, but her control of it. Her refusal to break or bend or play their game by their rules. The sound of her phone buzzing broke the silence. Another message from Sienna. Another piece of evidence to add to their growing collection. Another reminder that the real fight was still to come. The empty hallways of Dunbar High echoed with Amara's footsteps as she walked beside Mr. Ruiz, the school custodian. Late Friday afternoon, sunshine slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the freshly mopped floors. Her suspension meant she could only return after hours to clear out her locker, supervised like a criminal. Mr. Ruiz jingled his keys quietly, his weathered face kind but worried. "Take your time, Mija," he said softly. "I'll wait right here." Amara nodded, approaching her locker with measured steps. Something felt wrong. The air seemed too still, too quiet. Her fingers brushed the combination lock, and she noticed dark smudges around its edges. The lock clicked open. As she pulled the door, something wet dripped onto her hand. Yellow and sticky. Raw egg. Her stomach clenched as the locker door swung wide. The sight hit her like a physical blow. Her books lay scattered, pages torn and smeared with yolk. Broken eggshells littered the shelves. But worst were the words. Ugly slurs scrawled in thick black marker across the inside of her door. Hatred spelled out in jagged letters. A folded paper fluttered down. She caught it, already knowing what it would say. The message was crude, written in mocking script. "Try hitting us again, freak." Behind her, Mr. Ruiz muttered something in Spanish, his voice tight with anger. Movement flickered at the edge of her vision, a shadow sliding between classroom doors. Her muscles tensed instinctively. They were here, waiting. She could feel their presence like static in the air. "Mr. Ruiz," she said quietly, "you should go." "No, I stay. Please." Her voice was firm but gentle. "It's okay." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I call security." "No time." She turned to face the hallway as footsteps approached from multiple directions. "Just go." They emerged from the shadows like wolves, Chase, Hunter, and Dylan. Phones already recording, cruel smiles on their faces. Chase's swagger seemed especially confident today. "No cameras now," he taunted, gesturing at the dead security cameras above. "No audience. Just us and you, freak." Amara stood perfectly still, her breathing steady. She could smell their sweat, their fear masked as aggression. Hunter flexed his fingers, circling left. Dylan moved right. "You really thought you could embarrass us and get away with it?" Chase's voice echoed in the empty hall. "Time to learn your lesson." Hunter struck first, a wild haymaker aimed at her head. Amara moved like water, stepping inside his reach. Her hand caught his wrist, redirecting his momentum. He stumbled past her, crashing into the lockers with a thunderous bang. Dylan rushed in, thinking he saw an opening. Her kick caught him perfectly in the solar plexus. Not full force, just enough to drop him gasping to his knees. Control. Always control. A metallic click made her spin. Chase stood with a penknife, blade glinting in the afternoon light. His hand shook slightly as he slashed at her. Time seemed to slow. Years of training took over. She twisted inside his guard, caught his wrist with both hands. A simple joint lock, pressure applied precisely. The knife clattered to the floor as Chase yelped in pain. She could have broken his wrist, could have driven him face first into the concrete. Instead, she controlled his descent, letting him fold to his knees. The knife lay between them. She picked it up carefully and set it on a windowsill, well out of reach. Hunter and Dylan stayed down. The fight knocked out of them. Chase knelt, cradling his wrist, fear finally showing through his mask of bravado. Amara stood in the center of them all, breathing hard but steady. Her voice came out quiet but clear. "You can't plant fear in someone who already faced it." Mr. Ruiz stood at the end of the hall, watching everything. His face showed a mixture of concern and grim satisfaction. Another truth witnessed, another injustice seen clearly in the light. The boys scrambled to their feet, backing away. Their phones had fallen during the fight, screens cracked on the hard floor. No victory videos this time. No edited clips to twist the truth. Amara remained motionless, watching them retreat. Her hands were steady. Her breath was calm. She had won without throwing a single punch, just like Sensei taught her. The victory wasn't in hurting them, but in showing them their power had limits. The sound of their running footsteps faded down the hall, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of what had just happened. Monday morning arrived with a gray drizzle that matched the mood in Principal Carr's office. Amara sat straight-backed in the hard chair, her her mother beside her radiating quiet fury. Across the broad desk, Principal Carr's manicured fingers tapped an anxious rhythm on a stack of papers. Coach Whitcomb paced behind them like a caged animal, his face flushed with manufactured outrage. "This is exactly what we warned you about," he boomed, jabbing a finger toward Amara. "She's dangerous. My son and those other boys were just retrieving their gym bags when she attacked them." Denise Johnson's hand tightened on her purse strap. "That's not what happened, and you know it. We have evidence." Coach Whitcomb pulled out his phone, tapping the screen with aggressive force. A video began to play, grainy and choppy, showing only fragments of the fight. Amara executing perfect defensive moves, but with all context stripped away. No sign of the knife, the racial slurs, or the initial ambush. "Convenient editing," Denise said coldly. Principal Carr cleared her throat. "Mrs. Johnson, we take these incidents very seriously. The security footage from Friday afternoon appears to have technical difficulties. But what we can see is deeply concerning." "Technical difficulties?" Denise's voice rose slightly. "Like the technical difficulties with the cafeteria cameras last time?" "The system is old," Principal Carr said smoothly. "But what matters is the safety of all our students. And right now, your daughter poses a clear threat." Amara's face remained carefully neutral, even as her chest tightened. Through the office window, she could see students arriving for the day, huddled under umbrellas, already whispering and pointing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably another news alert about herself. The local media had picked up the story overnight. Headlines screamed, "Karate girl loses control," and "Martial arts student attacks classmates." The edited video was everywhere, each share and comment burying the truth deeper under a landslide of assumptions. "This isn't about safety," Amara said quietly. "This is about control." Coach Whitcomb's face darkened. "You watch your tone, young lady. You're lucky we're not pressing charges." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Ms. Park entered, clutching a manila folder. "Principal Carr, I have documentation about Friday's incident that you need to see." "This meeting is private," Coach Whitcomb snapped. "As Amara's faculty advisor, I have every right to be here." Ms. Park's voice was steel wrapped in silk. She placed the folder on Principal Carr's desk. "Including evidence of premeditation and—" "That won't be necessary." Principal Carr didn't even glance at the folder. "The board has already made its decision." She pulled out an official-looking document, her signature fresh at the bottom. "Given the pattern of violent behavior and the clear danger to other students, Amara Johnson is hereby expelled from Dunbar High School, effective immediately." The word hung in the air like poison. Expelled. "This is ridiculous." Denise stood up, her nurse's scrubs rustling. "My daughter defended herself against an orchestrated attack. There were witnesses. Mr. Ruiz saw everything," Ms. Park added firmly. "He's willing to testify." "A custodian's word against security footage?" Coach Whitcomb scoffed. "The footage you deleted?" Ms. Park's eyes flashed. "Just like you deleted evidence of the cafeteria assault?" Principal Carr's smile turned brittle. "Ms. Park, may I remind you that your contract renewal is coming up? These accusations you're making are very serious. Are you threatening me? I'm suggesting you consider your future at this institution carefully." Amara watched the exchange silently, counting her breaths like Sensei taught her. 1, 2, 3. Her phone buzzed again. Another headline. Another twist of the knife. "Clear out your locker by noon," Principal Carr said, already turning to her computer. "Security will escort you." "She doesn't need an escort," Denise snapped. "She needs justice. What she needs is to learn there are consequences for violence." Coach Whitcomb's smugness filled the room like cheap cologne. Maybe this will teach her some real discipline. Amara stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She looked directly at Principal Carr, who couldn't quite meet her eyes. "You're right about consequences," she said softly, "but not about who needs to learn them." She walked out of the office with her head high, past the staring secretaries and whispering students. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step echoing with finality. Her phone vibrated one more time. A text from Sienna. Amara paused at her vandalized locker, remembering Friday's ambush, the hatred scrawled inside. With steady hands, she typed back a simple response. "If they hide truth, we'll expose it." The morning rain drummed against the windows as she gathered her remaining belongings. Behind her, she could hear her mother arguing with the administration, Ms. Park's voice rising in righteous anger. But Amara remained quiet, methodical, precise, just like her kata. They thought expulsion would break her, just like they thought suspension would silence her, just like they thought that egg would humiliate her. But they still didn't understand. She had spent years learning how to fall safely, how to absorb impact, how to turn an opponent's force against them. This was just another attack to redirect, another strike to block, another throw to roll through. She closed her locker for the last time, the metal clang reverberating through the empty hallway. Thunder rumbled outside Amara's living room window as she sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and open laptops. Miss Park occupied the worn armchair, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she scrolled through emails. Sienna huddled on the couch, her camera bag beside her, fingers flying across her keyboard. "Look at this," Sienna said, turning her screen. "I managed to recover some deleted messages from the group chat. They were planning the locker ambush for days." Amara leaned forward, scanning the cruel messages. Her jaw tightened at the racial slurs mixed with their plotting. They really thought they could get away with it again. A knock at the door made them all jump. Ms. Park answered it, ushering in Mr. Ruiz, who looked nervous as he slipped inside, shaking rain from his maintenance uniform. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly, glancing around. "But what they're doing, it's not right." He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "The security system backs up to a secondary server in the maintenance office. They don't know about it." Ms. Park plugged in the drive, and they clustered around her laptop. The footage was crystal clear. Kyle, Hunter, and Chase entering the locker area 15 minutes before Amara arrived. They could see them hiding, waiting, Chase pulling out the knife while the others snickered. "This proves it was premeditated," Ms. Park said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They were lying in wait." "Coach Whitcomb knew," Mr. Ruiz added softly. "I saw him talking to them before." He patted his son's shoulder and walked away. Lightning flashed outside as Amara watched the video continue, showing the entire confrontation. Her defense moves looked even more controlled on camera. Precise, measured, protective rather than aggressive. "We need to get this to the superintendent," Sienna said, already copying the files. "They'll just bury it again," Amara replied, shaking her head. "We need something bigger, something public." She paused, an idea forming. Something they can't hide from. Ms. Park looked up sharply. "What are you thinking? They want a public apology, right? To show everyone how sorry I am?" Amara's eyes gleamed. "Let's give them exactly what they want." Sienna caught on first, a slow smile spreading across her face. "A reconciliation meeting." "In the gym," Amara nodded. "For the press, to show how the school handles conflict resolution." "They'll never agree to that," Mr. Ruiz warned. "They will if they think it makes them look good," Ms. Park said, understanding dawning in her expression. "A chance to show their authority, their mercy." "And we'll be ready," Sienna added, patting her camera bag. "Multiple angles, live stream capability." They spent the next hour planning, voices low and intense over the storm's percussion. Ms. Park drafted a formal proposal for the meeting, coating it in bureaucratic language about healing and community values. Sienna mapped out camera positions and sight lines in the gym. Mr. Ruiz provided details about the building's layout, security systems, and blind spots. Meanwhile, Miss Sulpices, Park said, assembling a thick folder of evidence. I'll make sure the superintendent has everything. Anonymously, of course. The videos, the messages, the pattern of cover-ups. Through a secure server, Sienna added, helping encrypt the files. They won't trace it back to you. Another crack of thunder shook the windows. Amara stood, stretching muscles tight from sitting. I should get to the dojo. Sensei's expecting me. The others packed up, Mr. Ruiz slipping out first, then Sienna with her equipment. Ms. Park lingered, placing a hand on Amara's shoulder. Are you sure about this? She asked softly. It's risky. They could make things even worse. They already took everything they could, Amara replied. Now it's our turn. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm by the time Amara reached the dojo. The familiar scent of wood and incense wrapped around her as she entered, bowing at the threshold. Sensei Abe waited in the center of the training floor, a wooden board in his hands. Even in the dim evening light, Amara could see the word written across it in bold black letters. Fear. Your mother called, he said without preamble. She told me about the expulsion. Amara bowed again, deeper this time. They think they've won. And what do you think? I think they're afraid, she answered. Of the truth. Of being exposed. Sensei nodded slowly. Fear makes people dangerous, but it also makes them vulnerable. He held out the board. Break this when you stop fearing their lies. Amara took her stance, feeling the smooth wood under her fingers. She thought of all the smirking faces, the deleted videos, the twisted stories, the weight of their judgment, their assumptions, their hatred. She breathed in deeply, centering herself. Then, with perfect form and controlled power, she struck. The board split cleanly, the crack echoing through the empty dojo like the thunder outside. The pieces clattered to the floor, the word fear now broken in two. Dawn painted the dojo walls in soft amber light as Amara knelt on the worn training mat, her breathing steady and controlled. The familiar scent of pine cleaner and decades-old wood wrapped around her like a comfortable blanket. Her mind settled into the rhythmic pattern of meditation. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, release for 4. Sensei Abe's footsteps whispered across the floor, barely disturbing the morning stillness. He knelt beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Your mind is clouded, he observed quietly. Amara opened her eyes, meeting his steady gaze. I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. Ah, he nodded sagely. You're fighting shadows instead of focusing on your light. He reached out, adjusting her posture slightly. Remember, truth is your strongest strike. It needs no force behind it to land true. The morning light strengthened as they sat together, teacher and student, sharing the peaceful silence. Finally, Sensei Abe stood, offering Amara his hand. Your grandmother is waiting, he said softly. Go. Be strong. At home, Mama Ruth stood in the kitchen, her Bible open on the counter beside a steaming mug of tea. When Amara entered, she held out her arms without a word. Amara stepped into her grandmother's embrace, breathing in the familiar mix of lavender and vanilla that always clung to her clothes. Mama Ruth's hands were warm and strong as they gripped Amara's shoulders. Let me pray over you, child, she said, her voice rich with emotion. They bowed their heads together as Mama Ruth's words filled the kitchen. Lord, wrap your arms of protection around my granddaughter. Give her strength to stand in her truth, wisdom to move with purpose, and courage to face whatever comes. "Amen," Amara whispered, her grandmother's faith steadying her nerves. Across town, Sienna arrived early at the school gym, her backpack heavy with equipment. She moved carefully through the empty space, placing tiny cameras in the corners where shadows would hide them. Each lens was positioned perfectly, covering every angle of the coming confrontation. "Test 1, Test 2, she muttered into her phone, checking the video feeds. Crystal clear images populated her screen, showing every corner of the gymnasium. She nodded in satisfaction, then froze at the sound of footsteps. But it was only Ms. Park, looking professional and determined in her blazer. She carried a stack of press passes in one hand and her phone in the other. "The local news vans are already setting up outside," she reported quietly. "Channel 5 happened to hear about our reconciliation meeting from an anonymous source. They're very interested in covering this example of positive conflict resolution." Sienna smiled faintly. "How convenient." "Indeed." Ms. Park checked her watch. "The superintendent received our package this morning. Express delivery, very official looking." They worked together, arranging chairs in a circle, making the space look proper and organized for the cameras. Everything had to appear perfectly normal, perfectly planned. At home, Amara stood before her mirror, carefully putting on her crisp white karate gi. Each fold and tie was precise, deliberate. The belt, earned through years of discipline and practice, wrapped around her waist like armor. She pulled on loose track pants and a light jacket over the GI, concealing it completely. To anyone watching, she looked like a regular student coming to an afternoon meeting. But underneath, she was ready. Her phone buzzed with messages from their group chat. Sienna. Cameras set. All feeds working. Ms. Park. Press in position. Principal doesn't suspect. Mama Ruth. Remember who you are, baby. Stand tall. The afternoon sun began its descent as Amara walked toward the school, her steps measured and calm. The parking lot was filling with news vans, reporters checking equipment, curious onlookers gathering. She paused at the gym entrance, looking up at the building where everything had started, where they had tried to break her spirit with an egg and mockery, where they had twisted her defense into aggression, where they thought they could bury the truth under lies and deleted footage. "Time to end it," she said softly, and pulled open the door. The gymnasium lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the circle of chairs where soon her accusers would sit, thinking they were there to witness her submission. They had no idea they were walking into their own exposure. Amara touched the belt hidden under her jacket, feeling its familiar roughness against her fingertips. Truth was her strongest strike, and she was ready to let it land. The gymnasium lights hummed overhead, casting harsh fluorescent shadows across the circle of chairs. Principal Carr sat with perfect posture, her tailored blazer and carefully styled hair projecting authority. Beside her, Coach Whitcomb lounged with casual arrogance, his muscled arms crossed over his chest. Students and parents filled the bleachers, murmuring quietly. News cameras lined the back wall, their red recording lights steady. The air felt thick with anticipation, like the moment before a storm breaks. Kyle, Hunter, Chase, and Dylan clustered together near their coach, exchanging knowing glances. Their faces wore masks of false remorse, but their eyes glittered with barely contained satisfaction. Amara stood alone on the opposite side, her jacket still concealing her GI. She kept her breathing steady, just as she'd practiced thousands of times in the dojo. Every muscle was relaxed, but ready. Principal Carr cleared her throat. "We're here tonight for reconciliation," she announced, her voice carrying that professional warmth that never quite reached her eyes. "To put this unfortunate incident behind us and move forward as a community." Coach Whitcomb nodded sagely. "Violence has no place in our school," he declared, directing a pointed look at Amara. "But we believe in second chances, don't we, boys?" The bullies straightened up on cue. Kyle stepped forward first, his practiced speech dripping with fake sincerity. "We're sorry if our joke went too far," he said, emphasizing joke, with a slight smirk. "We didn't mean to crack your ego like that egg." Snickers rippled through his friends. Chase barely contained his grin. Amara took a measured step forward, her movements fluid and controlled. "You're right," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Let's talk honestly about what happened. All of it." She reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. "Like the messages you sent afterward, the threats, the deleted footage." Coach Whitcomb's smile tightened. "Now, let's not dwell on... Or how about we discuss the racial slurs you used in your group chat?" Amara continued, her tone still perfectly calm. "The ones where you planned the attack?" Principal Carr stood quickly. "That's enough. This meeting is about moving forward, not making accusations." In the shadows above the bleachers, tiny red lights began blinking on hidden cameras. Every word was streaming live to the school's website and local news stations. Chase pushed past Kyle, getting in Amara's face. "You think you're so smart," he snarled, shoving her shoulder roughly. "Always playing the victim." Amara didn't move, didn't flinch. "Don't," she warned quietly. "Or what?" Chase shoved harder, making her step back. "You'll go crazy again? Show everyone what you really are?" The gymnasium fell silent, tension crackling like electricity. Coach Whitcomb stood, his face darkening. Principal Carr reached for her phone, probably to call security. But they'd all miscalculated. Again. Chase lunged forward, aiming another shove. This time, Amara moved. Her jacket fell away as she pivoted, revealing the white GI beneath. Her hand caught Chase's extended arm, redirecting his momentum. He flew past her, stumbling to keep his balance. Hunter charged in from the side, thinking to catch her off guard. Amara dropped low, swept his legs out, and sent him crashing to the mat with a controlled flip that knocked the wind from his lungs. Kyle's scream of rage echoed off the walls as he rushed forward. Amara stepped back smoothly into a defensive stance, her movements precise and measured. "You wanted another round," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "Here it is." The hidden cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment. Every face in the bleachers was frozen, watching the scene unfold. Some had phones out, adding to the documentation. Kyle stopped short, suddenly unsure. The confidence drained from his face as he realized, too late, that they'd walked right into her trap. "Here it is," Amara repeated, standing perfectly balanced, ready for whatever came next. "The truth you tried to hide. The real story, playing out live." The gymnasium crackled with tension as everyone waited to see who would make the next move. The polished gym floor became a battlefield. Hunter snatched up a metal folding chair, his face twisted with rage. The screech of its legs against the floor echoed through the suddenly silent space. "You think you're so special?" he snarled, hurling the chair at Amara's head. She dropped and rolled, the chair clattering harmlessly behind her. In the same fluid motion, she pushed up from her crouch and launched a precise sidekick that caught Hunter square in the chest. The impact knocked him back several steps, leaving him gasping for air. Chase circled to her left, looking for an opening. His football training showed in his stance, low, ready to tackle. "Not so tough without your camera crew, are you?" He lunged, arms spread wide to grab her. But Amara was already moving. She stepped into his charge, using his own momentum against him. Her hip pivoted, her hands found his sleeve and collar, and suddenly Chase was airborne. He crashed down hard, and before he could recover, she had his arm locked in a textbook hold. "Yield," she commanded quietly. When he struggled, she applied just enough pressure to make him feel the control she had. Not enough to hurt, just enough to prove a point. "Let him go!" Dylan shouted, trying to sneak up behind her. Without releasing Chase, Amara glanced over her shoulder. She'd been tracking Dylan's footsteps the whole time, feeling his presence through years of training. As he reached for her, she released Chase and spun away from both boys. Dylan's momentum carried him forward. Amara caught his extended arm, stepped past his center of gravity, and executed a perfect hip throw. He landed on one of the gym mats with a heavy thud, the impact forcing a grunt from his lungs. Throughout it all, Amara's breathing remained steady, her movements precise. Each counter was measured, each lock applied with just enough force to control but never harm. This wasn't about hurting them. It was about showing them the difference between power and violence. Hunter had recovered his breath and charged again, this time joined by Chase. They came at her from opposite sides, thinking to overwhelm her. Amara waited until the last possible second, then dropped and rolled between them. The boys collided with each other, stumbling back in confusion. "Stop this!" Coach Whitcomb's voice boomed across the gym. His face was red with fury as he strode forward, reaching for Amara's arm. "This ends now!" His large hand clamped down on her forearm, fingers digging in. But Amara had been ready for this too. She rotated her arm in a circular motion, breaking his grip with a basic wrist escape she'd learned in her first year of training. The coach staggered back, surprise replacing his anger. Amara stepped away from all of them, maintaining her defensive stance. The gym had gone completely silent. Every face stared at her. The principal frozen, half rising from her chair. The boys scattered around her in various states of disarray. The coach rubbing his wrist where she'd broken his grip. "Still think I'm out of control?" she asked softly, her voice carrying in the silence. Her GI was still pristine white, not a hair out of place. Meanwhile, the boys were disheveled and panting, their earlier confidence shattered. The quiet was broken by a sudden commotion at the gym entrance. The double doors burst open with a bang, and students began pouring in. Teachers followed close behind, many with phones already recording. Their faces showed a mix of shock and awe at the scene before them. The truth was finally visible for everyone to see. No edited videos, no twisted narratives, just the raw reality of what happened when bullies pushed too far and found out their target could push back. Chase struggled to his feet, his earlier bravado gone. Hunter wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Dylan remained on the mat, looking dazed. Coach Whitcomb's face had drained of color as he realized how many witnesses now filled the gym. Amara held her position, calm and centered, surrounded by the aftermath of their failed attack. She didn't need to say another word. The scene spoke for itself. The bruises they'd sport tomorrow would come from their own aggression, not her defense. Every move she'd made had been precise, controlled, and necessary. Exactly what they'd claimed she wasn't capable of being. The crowd at the doors grew larger as more people pushed in, phones raised high to capture every detail. The sound of whispers and gasps filled the air, punctuated by the clicks of camera shutters and the soft beep of videos being started. Through it all, Amara remained perfectly still, a point of calm in the chaos they had created. She'd shown them exactly who she was. Not their victim, not their stereotype, but a warrior who chose control over violence every single time. The gymnasium had transformed from a place of attempted ambush into a stage where truth had finally been revealed. And every second of it was being recorded. Impossible to deny or edit away this time. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised high as Coach Whitcomb stepped forward, his face flushed with desperate anger. He jabbed a finger toward Amara, who stood perfectly still in her defensive stance. "Look at this," he bellowed to the gathered crowd. "She attacked these boys again, just like before. Violent, out of control. Spittle flew from his mouth as he raged. "This is exactly why we expelled her." Principal Carr nodded vigorously from her position near the wall. "Mr. Whitcomb is right. This display of aggression only proves our point." But Amara's calm voice cut through their accusations. "Sienna, show them what really happened." From the back of the gym, Sienna Clark stepped forward, laptop in hand. She typed quickly, and suddenly, the large projection screen on the gym wall flickered to life. The live stream that had been running since the start of the meeting played in crystal clear detail. The footage showed everything: Hunter throwing the chair, Chase's attempted tackle, Dylan's sneak attack. And through it all, Amara's controlled responses, never striking first, never using more force than necessary to defend herself. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She never attacked them. She protected herself." But Amara wasn't finished. She nodded to Sienna again. "Show them the rest." The screen split into two feeds. On one side, the current live stream continued. On the other, a new video began to play, grainy at first, then clearing to show the school hallway from an unusual angle. "This is from my dojo's security camera across the street," Amara explained, her voice steady. It captured everything through the hallway window's reflection. The footage showed Chase and Hunter approaching Amara's locker before the previous fight. They pulled out a penknife, planted it carefully, then stepped back to film their defense against her supposed attack. More damning evidence followed. Screenshots of text messages between Coach Whitcomb and the boys, planning how to edit the security footage. A voice recording of Principal Carr agreeing to handle the situation by expelling Amara instead of investigating. "No! No! No!" Coach Whitcomb roared. His composure completely shattered as his crimes played out on the big screen. "You can't! I believe we've seen quite enough." The new voice cut through the chaos like a knife. The crowd parted as Superintendent James Hayes stepped out from behind the gym's side entrance. His face was granite hard as he surveyed the scene. Ms. Park stood beside him, a thick folder of evidence in her hands. "Ms. Park has been keeping my office informed," Hayes continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent gym. "We've been gathering evidence, waiting to see how far this corruption would go." He turned to face Coach Whitcomb and Principal Carr. "I didn't want to believe educators could stoop this low, but here we are." The superintendent stepped to the center of the gym, directly under the glaring lights. "As of this moment, I am announcing the following actions, which will be formalized in writing tomorrow morning. Coach Dean Whitcomb is terminated from his position, effective immediately, and will face charges for evidence tampering and endangering minors." Coach Whitcomb's face went from red to purple. With an incoherent roar, he lunged at Amara, fists swinging wildly. But she was ready. Just as she had done with his students, she stepped aside, redirected his momentum, and sent him sprawling to the floor with a simple hip throw. He lay there, wheezing, as security finally moved in to restrain him. Superintendent Hayes continued, as if there had been no interruption. "Principal Carr is suspended pending review. Chase Whitcomb, Hunter Phillips, and Dylan Matthews are expelled, with assault charges to be filed through proper channels." He turned to face the cameras that were still streaming. "Furthermore, I offer a public apology to Amara Johnson on behalf of the school district. We failed you. But your dignity and discipline in the face of that failure have taught us all a valuable lesson." Amara stood in the center of the gym, her breathing steady and calm. The overhead lights caught the white of her GI, making her seem to glow. Around her, people began to applaud, softly at first, then building to a thunderous roar. Some were crying, others cheering, all witnessing the moment justice finally arrived. Mrs. Park wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her student stand tall, unbroken and vindicated. Sienna beamed from behind her laptop, proud to have helped expose the truth. Even Mr. Ruiz, the security guard who had witnessed so much, nodded in approval from his position by the door. Through it all, Amara maintained her disciplined stance, neither celebrating nor gloating. She had won not through violence, but through patience, strategy, and unwavering control. The very qualities they had tried to deny in her had become the instruments of their downfall. The applause continued to echo through the gymnasium, bouncing off the walls and filling the space with the sound of long-delayed justice finally being served. The morning sun painted Dunbar High's brick walls in warm light as Amara walked through the front doors. Her footsteps echoed differently now. No more whispers followed her, no sideways glances carried mockery. Instead, phones lit up with notifications as students scrolled through headlines splashed across their screens. Black Belt Girl exposes racism and corruption at local high school. Karate students stand against bullying reveals systematic discrimination. School officials fired after student fighter proves institutional bias. Ms. Park met her at her locker, beaming with pride. The superintendent called an all-school assembly this morning. He wants to make a formal announcement about the changes. Amara nodded, running her fingers over her locker door, now clean of slurs and vandalism. "Changes are good," she said quietly, "but they have to last." As they walked toward the gymnasium, students began to notice her. Unlike before, faces brightened with recognition and respect. A freshman girl who had always hunched her shoulders while walking past the bullies stood straighter when she saw Amara. Others nodded in acknowledgement or smiled openly. The gymnasium was packed when they arrived. Where just yesterday there had been chaos and revelation, now there was anticipation and hope. Superintendent Hayes stood at the podium, his presence commanding attention. "As of this morning," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner, "we begin a new chapter at Dunbar High. Principal Carr's office has been cleared, and we are implementing immediate administrative changes." He gestured to a woman standing nearby. Dr. Sarah Chen, he introduced her, an experienced educator with a background in restorative justice and cultural competency. She would serve as interim principal while a thorough search was conducted. But the biggest announcement came next. "Ms. Johnson," Hayes called out, "would you join me up here?" Amara walked to the podium, her steps measured and calm. The same walk that had carried her through months of harassment now carried her toward vindication. "Your courage exposed more than just individual acts of bullying," Hayes continued. "It revealed systemic problems we must address. To that end, we're approving your proposal for a new student organization, the Karate and Justice Club." Applause erupted through the gymnasium. Amara spotted Sienna in the crowd, clapping and wiping tears from her eyes. Even Mr. Ruiz, standing guard by the door, broke his usual stoic expression with a smile. "The club," Hayes explained, "will combine self-defense training with discussions about justice, equality, and standing up to discrimination. Ms. Johnson will serve as lead student instructor under the guidance of her sensei." As if on cue, the gym doors opened. Sensei Abe walked in, his presence commanding immediate respect. He approached the podium with measured steps, bowed slightly to the assembly, then turned to face Amara. "You have honored the true spirit of martial arts," he said, his voice carrying despite its quietness. "You fought the biggest fight, and won without hate. That is the mark of a true warrior." Amara bowed deeply to her teacher, emotion threatening to break through her composed exterior. When she straightened, she saw dozens of students already lining up to sign the club's registration sheet. Later that afternoon, Amara stood in the converted wrestling room that would serve as the club's dojo. She had changed into her gi, the white uniform crisp and clean. New mats covered the floor, and training equipment lined the walls. But what caught everyone's attention was the simple wooden board mounted in a place of honor. The board she had broken, labeled Fear, now hung in a simple frame. Below it, she had added a small plaque, Fear Breaks. Truth stands. Students began filing in for the first class. Some confident, others nervous, all curious. A small girl with tight braids, similar to Amara's own, approached hesitantly. "Were you scared?" she asked, looking up at the framed board. "When you had to stand up to them?" Amara knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "Yes," she answered honestly. "But being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you face the fear anyway." The girl nodded solemnly, then took her place on the mat with the others. Amara moved to the front of the class, surveying the faces before her. Faces that showed hope, determination, and the desire to learn not just how to fight, but how to stand tall. She bowed to her students, and they bowed back. As she began teaching the first basic moves, she caught her reflection in the mirror. No longer the quiet girl who endured in silence, but a teacher, a leader, someone who had transformed her pain into purpose. The framed board watched over them all, a reminder that fear could be broken, that justice could prevail, and that sometimes the strongest fight wasn't won with fists, but with unwavering dignity and truth. The afternoon sun streamed through the high windows of Dunbar High's gymnasium, casting long rectangles of golden light across the blue mats. The rhythmic sound of bare feet moving in unison filled the space, as Amara led her students through their basic stances. "Remember," she called out, her voice clear and steady, "power comes from your center. Feel the earth beneath your feet." 20 students moved through the positions, front stance, back stance, horse stance, their faces showing varying degrees of concentration. Among them was Sarah Whitcomb, Chase's younger sister, who had begged to join despite her family's initial resistance. She mirrored Amara's movements with particular intensity, as if trying to prove something to herself. "Good form, Sarah," Amara said quietly as she passed. The girl's eyes lit up at the praise. The mix of students reflected the changes at Dunbar: Black, white, Asian, Hispanic kids training side by side. Some wore pristine new GIs, others in PE clothes until they could afford proper uniforms. But on the mat, they were all equal, all learning the same fundamental truth. Strength came from within. "Now pair up," Amara instructed. "Practice your blocking techniques. Remember, control is everything." Laughter bubbled up as partners took turns throwing slow-motion punches and practicing their blocks. The sound echoed off the walls, not the cruel laughter that had once filled this space, but the genuine joy of learning and growing together. A small hand tugged at Amara's GI sleeve. She looked down to find Destiny, a 7th grader with braids decorated with bright beads, looking up at her with serious eyes. "Ms. Johnson?" Destiny asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Were you scared when they hit you with the egg and everything?" The question brought the room to a gradual hush. Other students paused their practice, turning to listen. Amara knelt down to meet Destiny at eye level, her movement graceful and deliberate. "Yes," she answered, her voice gentle but firm. "I was scared. Anyone would be scared when people try to hurt them." She placed a hand on Destiny's shoulder. "But being brave doesn't mean you never feel fear. It means you stand up anyway. You face what scares you and say, 'You can't break me.'" Destiny's eyes drifted to the wall where the broken board hung in its simple frame. The word fear, split cleanly down the middle, served as a daily reminder of that truth. "How did you know you could do it?" another student asked. "Stand up to them." Amara stood, addressing the whole class now. "Because I had people who believed in me. 'My grandmother, who taught me that dignity is stronger than hatred. My sensei, who showed me that true power isn't about hurting others, it's about protecting what's right. As if summoned by her words, Mama Ruth appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, her eyes twinkling as she watched her granddaughter teach. Pride radiated from her presence, quiet but profound. "Back to practice," Amara called out, and the students returned to their drills with renewed focus. The afternoon light shifted, painting everything in warm amber tones. Amara walked to the gym's window, watching the sunlight fall across her face. The same windows that had once witnessed her humiliation now framed her triumph. Her voice carried softly, almost like a meditation. "They tried to break me with an egg. I broke their system instead." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day!